What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Joannis or Joe Hatagwa. I'm a Sierra Leonean American living here in Accra, Ghana. And if you want to be a part of a discussion on reparations, then this is the video for you. All right. We are live. We're live on Instagram, live on Facebook, two different channels. And we are live on YouTube as always. So let's give it some time for people to join in. I see some people joining on Instagram. So today's conversation is about reparations. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of reparations, the precedent for it here not here, but in the United States. And then also we'll talk a little bit about who should get it. And I want to get your opinions and your thoughts. Really want to hear from the folks in the audience what their thoughts are on who should get reparations and how they should be distributed. We'll talk even about what was proposed by Bob Johnson last year and then brought back up this year. So let's give some time for people to join. In the meantime, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and start what I normally do. iTuber12 says we live. We live. We are live, ladies and gentlemen. All right, cool. So and everyone else in between, by the way. We are live, everyone. Put it that way. All right, cool. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to share my screen. Those of you who are watching on Instagram Live, if you want to see what's on my screen, you can jump over to the YouTube Live. I pinned it in the comments. So just check I'm pretty sure I pinned the comment. So yeah, you can just check that link out in the comments. Yeah, there we go. It's pinned. So if you want to check out the live on YouTube, just click the link in the comment there. All right, cool. But otherwise, you can just listen along as I talk through it. I'm just going to read off the screen and talk through a couple of different things. So while we wait for some people to get on, I always do some housekeeping. So for those of you who don't know me, who are new to watching me on live, I see a few new people on Instagram Live and some people I recognize from the YouTube Live. My name is Joannis, or I also go by Joe. I am a Sierra Leonean American living here in Accra, Ghana. I've been here since December of 2020. I came here for the year of return in 2019. I had been going to Sierra Leone for a few years prior to coming to Ghana for the first time. So I'd definitely been to West Africa before. My family is from Sierra Leone. Both my parents were born and raised there. I was born in the US. But in 2019, I got my dual citizenship. I started a business, opened a bank account, and I purchased some property. So, in middle of last year, I just decided I was going to move to the continent, and I decided to move to Ghana in December of last year. So those of you who are new to who I am, that's my story. I know a lot of you follow me on Instagram, but may not even get a chance to know who the person is behind the account. So this is me. So you know who I am. So real quick, there are already some questions coming in. So let me jump into some of these questions and then I'll do, actually, you know what? Let me take a step back. Let me start with some housekeeping, just for those of you who aren't aware, who don't know who I am and don't know what this process looks like when I go live and when my content comes out. I want to address all of you and make sure that you guys know what's going on and what's going on with this channel. So with that, give me a second to just share my screen. So those of you who are watching on Instagram Live, you guys aren't going to be able to see this, as I mentioned, but I'll just talk through it, like I said before, so to give you an idea of what we are talking about. So, so I got some new upload dates and times for all of you who've been following both Instagram and YouTube. I've started to make some adjustments over the last 2 months, and I'm going back to the original schedule. So I'll share that in a second. We'll talk a little bit about the website, then we'll get into the reparations conversation. I'm definitely interested to hear what those guys on Instagram have to say and what those of you on YouTube have to say. So really quickly, 3 videos this week. We have this live, which is today. There's always going to be a live on Monday at 9 p.m. GMT As of right now, that's 5 p.m. EST, 2 p.m. Pacific. In Ghana, we do not do daylight savings, so it's always between 4 and 5 hours difference between Ghana in the GMT time zone. Well, actually, let me say specifically Ghana, between Ghana um, and the US Eastern Standard Time. So it'll either be 5 p.m. or 4 p.m. Eastern, and it'll either be either 2 p.m. or 1 p.m. Pacific when I go live on Mondays at 9 p.m. GMT. Wednesdays, especially this Wednesday, I am doing my weekly vlog. This week, I am going to talk to you guys about going to buy a MiFi, needing to buy a MiFi, Wi-Fi, little portable Wi-Fi. Super important because internet goes out all the time. You need to have backups. And then also I do a house update, and I got one more update, which is escaping me. But anyway, you'll get that on Wednesday. And then on Saturday, I'm going to take you guys on a tour of a luxury hotel in Sierra Leone. I did a tour when I was there, and I want to share it with you guys. I don't think people really know that Sierra Leone has luxury hotels. So I'm definitely going to share that with you guys too. All right, cool. So that is what you're going to expect to see from me this week. So Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. And ideally, I'd like to stick to this schedule. So if you're ever looking for new content from me, you can show up here at 9 p.m. GMT on Mondays, and then just be on the lookout. And on that note, in order to make sure that you're up to date, make sure you're liking the content, you're sharing it with other people, you subscribe, and when you subscribe, turn on the post notifications. So like on YouTube, and for instance, once you subscribe, turn on post notifications, and when you do, make sure you hit all, so that every time a video comes out or a comment comes out, you get it. So about this time, an urgent message arrived one day at noon to inform the African his older foster father was 70 miles away at the coast breathing. Sorry, I don't know. That's just reading comment. Don't really get what that meant. But shout out to Mr. Bounce Los Angeles for joining. Tiawa Glam, shout out to you. I see you. Okay, cool. So just make sure that you turn on post notifications so you know every time a new video comes out. All right, so real quick, the website. So as I mentioned previously, the website is authenticafrican.com. This goes with the brand. Those of you who are following me on Instagram know it's authentic_African. Those of you who are following me on YouTube, the channel is Authentic African. The website's Authentic African. I sell products made by Africans in Africa to anyone really in the diaspora. But my target market is, of course, other Africans or diasporans in the diaspora, specifically in the US for right now. So it's all handmade and ethically sourced. You know, everyone is compensated for their the work that they do, and it's really good work. I traveled a lot over the last year, so a lot of my stuff is in storage, or I'll be showing you all the stuff that I purchased myself before I even started selling any of these items. I got masks and carvings and chessboards and all kinds of stuff. And I've sold jewelry and soaps. I've used the black soap a ton. So anyway, there's a bunch of stuff on the site. If you're interested, check it out. All right, so let's get into the conversation of reparations. But before we do, let me just see if there are any other questions or comments on the live. There's a ton here. Okay, so before we get into it, let me look at what we got going on. And let's see. There's a bunch of people joining from Instagram. Shout out to all of you guys for joining on Instagram. So Mr. Bounce Los Angeles asked about from the website, what's the hottest product? You know, it actually varies. I've had people buy all kinds of different things. My favorite products are the black soaps. I just like black soap. And so, you know, and I bought a lot of shea butter and cocoa butter too. So those are my favorite items. Things that tend to go without any advertising are like the masks and carvings, because people like to hang up the masks or put the carvings on bookshelves and things like that. So, so that's what I've seen most on in terms of purchases. Good questions though. Okay, cool. So, all right, there's a lot here, And so let me get into the stuff, and then I'll get into some of the questions, because I do want to make sure we spend some time on some of this content here. So first of all, the idea of reparations in the United States was introduced by a man named William T. Sherman. Um, he was a soldier, a businessman, educator, and author. He served as a general in the Union Army during the American Civil War. He got recognition for commanding the military strategy, but also he was criticized for his harshness. Basically, he has the scorched earth policies that he implemented against the Confederate States. Some people think that it's in bad faith, actually, that the idea of reparations even happened, because it was just an idea to kind of punish the Southern Confederates by taking their land and giving it to the enslaved, formerly enslaved Africans that were now living as Americans in the United States. Um, so that's a little bit about him. He did issue an order, this order for the 40 acres. The mule part came later, with 20 leaders in the Black community in Savannah, Georgia, where he was headquartered. So what is um, so we'll get into, okay, so Mr. Bounce Los Angeles says, let's define what we want in terms of reparations. Is it land, money, tax breaks, free education, etc.? So we'll get into that in a second. Like, what do you want for reparations? But we'll talk about what's been proposed. What's up, Cali Cal? Shout out to you for joining. Shout out to Yaheli. If I'm pronouncing your name right, I'm sorry if I'm not. All right, cool. So just three main parts that I'm going to go over. I mean, there's a lot to talk about here, so I'm just going to try to keep it simple and like high level. You know, if you guys want to do more research on this, you have plenty of time to do that. But really quick, just so it's clear, it's a special field order number 15, the 40 acres and the mule order. It was issued on January 16th, 1865. There are three main sections. Section 1 basically states the islands from Charleston, right? Charleston, sorry. The islands from Charleston south, the abandoned rice fields along the rivers of 30 miles from the sea, and the country bordering St. Johns River, Florida, are reserved and set apart for the settlement of Negroes, now made free by the acts of war and the proclamation of the President of the United States. Section 2 specifies that these new communities would be governed entirely by Black people themselves on the islands and in the settlements hereafter, to be established no white person whatsoever, unless military officers and soldiers detailed for duty, will be permitted to reside, and solely and exclusive management of affairs will be left to the freed people themselves. By the laws of war and the orders of the President of the United States, the Negro is free and must be dealt with as such. And lastly, the third section says, and it specifies the allocation of land. So each family shall have a plot of not more than 40 acres of tillable ground, and when it borders on some water channel with not more than 800 feet waterfront, in the possession of which the land, the military authorities will afford them protection until such time as they can't protect themselves, or until Congress shall regulate their title. So basically, that's the idea of the 40 acres, right? And how it was supposed to be given out. Now, what happened, right? Because obviously, this was stated by William Sherman, and it did not go into effect. So Andrew Johnson, who was, and so by the way, Sherman was under Lincoln as president, and so this was during the time of Lincoln's presidency, when he was succeeded by Andrew Johnson, who was a sympathizer with the South. He overturned that order in the fall of 1865 and returned the land to South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida coast to the planters who had originally owned it. So basically, those who were part of the Confederate Army. So they got their land back. So that's basically what happened. So now, like, let's talk about like what's happened since, right? So there is precedence, right? So let me take a step back. So we're talking about reparations, and there are times in history, in American history, where reparations were given to other groups, right? So for those who think that reparations are impossible or shouldn't happen, I think one thing to keep in mind is that there is precedent. And one thing you know about the United States is it always functions on precedent. They don't remove presidents from office because of precedent, because the idea is if you remove one president from office, then other presidents can be removed. They don't indict a sitting president because the idea is if you indict one president, then you can indict another one. Even though they impeach presidents, they don't tend to remove them, right? So, with that being said, precedent is a super important part of American law, right? If you think about it, that's how most cases are won. You know, there's precedent for this. This case in 1865 said this and this and this, and that makes it so that this case should be won by me, attorney X, right? So I just want to make it clear that that's the reason why I'm talking about this precedent, because since it's happened before, there's no reason to believe that it can't happen again, although chances might be slim to unlikely or maybe not at all. There is precedent for it. So let's get into it. So Native Americans. In 1946, Congress created the Indian Claims Commission, a body designed to hear historic grievances and compensate tribes for lost territories. It commissioned extensive historical research and ended up awarding $1.3 billion to 176 tribes and bands. The money was largely given to groups, which then distributed the money among their members. For some tribes whose members didn't live on a reservation, the money was distributed per capita. For those who did live on reservations, the money was often earmarked for like tribal projects. However, the actual funds only averaged about $1,000 per person of Native American ancestry, and most of the money was put in trust accounts held by the United States government, which has been accused of mismanagement over the years. So unfortunately, it hasn't actually made its way to the hands of most people who were supposed to get it. So although it's been done, in some cases, it hadn't been done in a way that, you know, most people who think about reparations are expecting it to be handed out. So, precedent for Japanese Americans. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941 marked the United States' official entrance into World War II. It also pushed the U.S. government's legacy of anti-Asian sentiment into the most extreme. Just 2 months later, President Roosevelt signed an executive order that authorized incarcerating people of Japanese descent based on widespread suspicion that they were acting as espionage agents. So 100,000 people, 2/3 of them who were U.S. citizens, were detained in these barracks surrounded by barbed wire and fences called internment camps. In 1988, over 40 years after the internment camps closed, Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act, which offered formal apology and paid $20,000 to each survivor. That was 80,000 people. Now, some people don't know this, but with the Tuskegee experiment, which comes up a lot in my conversations and a lot in the comments on the Authentic African Instagram page, let's just kind of talk through it. So in 1973, for example, the U.S. began to attempt the reconciliation for the Tuskegee experiments, in which 600 Black men were unknowingly left untreated for syphilis after being misled by officials who involuntarily enrolled them in a treatment program. So I think that there is some misconceptions around this. I think there are some people who believe that they were actually given syphilis, and that actually might have been the case. You know, that's one of the conspiracies. But the official story is that they were misled into being treated, and they went untreated so that you could see the effects of syphilis on people. After the class action lawsuit, the men were awarded $10 million by the United States. And they also promised to provide healthcare and burial services for the men. Eventually, the state ended up awarding healthcare and other services to their spouses and their descendants too, their immediate descendants. So there's that. Okay, so in terms of proposals, so this gets to Mr. Bounce Los Angeles' question. What do we want for reparations? Cali Cow says, where are the reparations for the Black African community? Mr. Balance Los Angeles mentions that also Italians were given reparations, Japanese we mentioned, some Jewish were given, groups were awarded reparations. So yeah, so there is precedent for reparations being given to so many different other groups. Okay, so this is Bob Johnson's proposal. Now, Bob Johnson is the former founder of BT. He sold it to Viacom, made him a billionaire at the time. He was the first Black American billionaire. He's no longer listed on the Forbes billionaires list, but he's still doing very well for himself. And these days, one of the things that he is really pushing for is reparations. If I'm not mistaken, he is a conservative, meaning conservative leaning Republican, I guess you could say, in America. And so he has been trying to push this with Republican lawmakers. I don't think to much avail. It seems like, from what it seems like, the people who are most in support of this in terms of the two political parties in the United States tend to lean more Democrat. But at the end of the day, the political parties have a lot of similarities. We won't get into that. But with that, what he is proposing is $350,000 one-time cash payment to over 42 million African American eligible descendants. And this calculation is based on income, education, savings, and home ownership, and the wealth gap. And so the total amount is $14.7 trillion. So the question becomes like, who gets it, right? So this guy is a professor of economics at Samuel Du Bois Cook Center at Duke University. He's enlisted about a dozen Black academics and activists. They call themselves the Planning Committee for Reparations, and they crafted a report that basically rolled out the rationale for why descendants of slaves should be paid reparations, and suggestions for how and to implement such a program. He basically said it should be given to people who prove that they've descended from persons enslaved in the United States, and he feels like that's easy to do because of all the ancestry databases. And then he would say that it would exclude, so he didn't say this, but what it means is that it would exclude a number of Black Americans whose ancestors were enslaved elsewhere, so like Jamaica, Haiti, or the Bahamas. Now, the 40 Acres and a Mule was intended for Black enslaved Americans, not Black enslaved Haitians, Jamaicans, and other places. So I guess there's a point to be made there. However, many of them are in the United States and are dealing with some of the after effects of slavery. So maybe there's some conversation to be had there. But basically, his core argument is that Black slaves were subject to a form of sustained race-biased discrimination unique in American history, robbing them of individual agency, voting rights, and the ability to accumulate wealth and education. So that's his argument for why reparations should be given. And his argument also is that it should be for Americans, or Americans who are descendants of slaves. So I've heard this conversation actually a ton. And how do you determine if you qualify for reparations, right? So let's talk about that, right? So for instance, I myself, both my parents were born and raised in Sierra Leone, and they came to the United States, or went to the United States under their own accord. They literally just flew in the 60s and 70s. However, my mom is from the Creole tribe, and that is a tribe of people who migrated north to Nova Scotia, and 130, it was 130 or so, I can't remember what the number is, but I talked about it on one of my videos. But they basically went back to Sierra Leone, established Freetown, and the Creole tribe of Sierra Leone are direct descendants of slaves from the Americas. Many from the United States, many from other places, or some from other places. And so the question is, do I qualify for reparations, or does like half of me qualify for reparations? So do I qualify for half a payment? Like, how does it work, right? And that's one of the questions I think we need to ask. So, Bob Johnson's plan also has, money for Black farmers, money for education, and some other things as well. But I haven't really seen a comprehensive reparations plan. So I want you guys to tell me what you guys think should be included. I'll start to give you my thoughts. I mean, I think number one, it should include land, right? If you guys are not aware, for instance, the Trump family and a few other major like real estate families, 2 generations ago, under I think it was Eisenhower, there were some grants and loans given at really, really low rates to buy land, right? And so those people were able to get land at really, really cheap prices and also be able to sell it, develop on it, and whatnot, right? And so I think that, and of course, in those instances, people of color were not awarded that same opportunity. So I think land is hugely important. I think it's the most important. Cash payments, I think, are also good because at the end of the day, cash means more money circulating in the economy, and that's just better for everyone. And so if you're a small business owner, or if you're somebody who works a job that doesn't pay well and you get a cash payment, it might allow you to pursue entrepreneurial endeavors, which is what America's all about, right? So those are my first two statements. At least cash and land is what I would like to see. And then I think figuring out who gets it, I think, is also important, right? Do I qualify for some portion of it? Maybe not the full amount, because my on my father's side, right, they're all like Sierra Leonean and go further back in Guinea and other places, but definitely not from the United States. But then my mother's side are returnees to Sierra Leone about four generations or three generations before my mother. And my mother considers herself Sierra Leonean, but she's actually a descendant of American slaves. So does that mean that I get a portion of it? That's a question that should be asked. Do other people who are Africans living in America, do they get a portion of it? Right. So these are all questions that we should be asking. All right. So iTuber 12 has a bunch of stuff here. So I want to start putting some stuff up and see what he says. Some type of reparations are owed by African countries as well. For this region, original intent and purpose of Liberia and Freetown should be restored. The large reparations used to build them up. Yeah, I mean, so that would be then, of course, on the Europeans to do, right? Specifically, when we're talking about Liberia and Sierra Leone, it would have to be the British to establish some kind of form of reparations and agree to it. But as we've seen in recent history, the Europeans have very little interest in giving reparations, let alone even returning the stolen artifacts that are in their museums. So I think it's very unlikely for the Europeans to do it. But you never know. I mean, I think it's something that could be pushed for, but I don't hear enough Africans pushing for it. And you got to have leverage sometimes for something like this. And I just don't know what leverage can be used or should be used in order to get it. This culture of looking down on people of enslaved ancestry is a stain of on Africa and countries to this day. I believe in 2014 or so, Canada and Senegal presidency was called the descendant of slaves. Yeah, I mean, I think we have to look at it as a strength, not necessarily a weakness. As of March 2021, there is approximately 140 billion sent out in the stimulus money, which proves there are available finances. That's what Mr. Bounce Los Angeles said. Yes, that is true. Now that was 140 billion in stimulus money. The price tag that Baum Johnson is putting out there is 147 trillion. So it is a multiple of 10. Is it 10 or 100? A multiple of 100 on that number. So the money's there. Don't get me wrong; it is definitely there, but it is difficult to figure out how to allocate that money and where to get that money from, right? I think that's the biggest challenge I think in America, right? Is like you have two political parties, both of which love to spend money on the military, but don't like to spend money on programs such as this. Yeah. So okay. So yeah. Oh, so okay. I guess the Grio had to come disprove that. Okay. Um, okay, there's a lot here. So let me just jump through. Soon the whole money market will collapse. Only digital money will be coming. Yeah, sure. I think that is one thing that has been talked about a lot is Bitcoin. And we're going to talk about that too, by the way. I'm going to be interviewing somebody who actually left the United States and moved to West Africa who focuses on Bitcoin. But let's keep on topic of reparations. What do we got? To be clear, the argument isn't that certain folks shouldn't get reparations. The argument is folks from Jamaica, Caribbean, et cetera, need to make the reparations claims by their colonizers, example, the UK. Okay. Liberia was founded by African Americans and it would fall under USA to do. Sierra Leone would be the UK. Okay, that's fair. Yeah, because Liberia that's true. It was founded by Americans. So technically it should be the US to handle reparations for Liberia. but they're barely even talking about reparations here there in the U.S. So let alone Liberia, that I think is going to be a challenge. Okay, so what do we got, guys? What are you guys thinking? Let me just scroll through and see what people are saying. What do you guys think about Bob Johnson's plan? Okay, so Mr. Bounce Los Angeles says land is the most substantial. Priestess of Culture says cash and land. Okay, I'm with you on that. Um, I think is it Girio? Oh, Gear Official says the disenfranchised should all be repatriated and have equal reparations to their loss. Priestess of Culture says the whole diaspora in Africa should get it. Colonizers happened to all of us. Colonization happened to all of us. Get everything back. That's for our ancestors. Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, right? Everybody gets reparations, regardless of where you are on the continent of Africa or in the United States. But I think you have to really target specific groups in order to actually get legislation and get movement on this, because they do have to allocate funds, and that requires, in every country that I'm aware of that has been a colonizer of other countries at one point in time, require votes. People that you voted into office have to then vote on these things, right? And one of the hardest things for all of them to do is voting on allocation of funds, especially for funds like this. So, but yeah, I think so. So, like the early examples of the U.S. focusing on Liberia and the United States, the U.K. focusing on countries like Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Ghana, and the Caribbean, and then maybe Spain focusing on some of Latin America. I don't even know if they have the funds in Spain. Maybe they do. And then like the French, for instance, focusing on, Francophone Africa. So that's partially North Africa, but also like, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, and a few other countries as well. Okay, cool. So let's see what else we got. All right, you guys wanted this topic, so I wanted to make sure I brought it to you. This isn't the normal discussion about like stuff that's specific to Ghana, but when I put it out there and asked what you guys wanted, a few people mentioned they wanted to talk about reparations. So I brought to you guys the topic of reparations. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments. There's a few of you who wanted to hear about it, so I'd like to hear more from you all. So yeah, any other comments, thoughts? And if not, if this topic feels like it's one that isn't getting too much traction from those who are on, we could always go into the Ask Me Anything segment of these calls, where you can ask me anything about my life here in Ghana, what's been going on with me, what I like, what I dislike, what I wish was different, things like that. Okay. So iTuber says UK done so much wrong that they can't even afford all the reparations they owe to Africa and Asia. I think USA can afford its reparations though, but the politics will never make it so. Yeah, I mean, there was this bill that was introduced, HR 40, and it was the first time it was brought to a vote. I think it's been a bill that had been introduced for I don't know 30 or 40 years. It was brought to a vote for the first time, if I'm not mistaken, earlier this year. And the idea of HR 40 is just a commission to study and develop the idea of reparations and how it could be done. It's not actually a bill to recommend or even enforce making reparations happen. So an idea to study means longer lead time for actually having to action on the idea of reparations. So okay. So OD99 says, I don't think Western countries will offer any significant reparations because we have no power to force them to do so. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that. I think the idea is like, if you want something to be legislated, you have to be in a position of power, right? This is like the conversation we were having last week about the idea of equal rights for the LGBTQ community. In the United States, there are folks in the position of power, whether it's financially or otherwise, and they've been able to get the United States to move forward on specific things. Same thing with other groups, right? I don't want to call out any particular groups, but all different groups who have people in position of power or wealth tend to be able to get things done, right? Because they can then threaten the power of those people who are currently in power. And I don't mean in some like conspiracy way. I just mean like, I'm no longer going to give you money for your next campaign if you don't focus on these couple of different things, or I will give money to a person who's going to primary against you, so that you don't win your seat in Congress or Senate the next time an election comes up, right? It's just that simple. And so I just don't think there is enough of that in at this point in time to really force the U.S. government or the U.K. to do it. So Staten Island 5. Shout out to Staten Island. I haven't been to Staten Island in years. But yeah, I went. When was the last time I was in Staten Island? Probably 2005, 2006. So Staten Island 5 says the breakdown of money from the UK and the US government. I think I missed an earlier statement, or maybe this is in response to something that I said. Mr. Bounce Los Angeles says, I think that Senate Senior Bob Johnson is proposing from the GOP conservative perspective is I'd just like to have some added pressure. This should be a loud topic with all politicians and community leadership. Yeah, so Bob Johnson is proposing it from a conservative GOP perspective. GOP meaning Grand Old Party, meaning the Republican Party. Yeah, so because he is a conservative, and so that's the party that he belongs to. So that's who he's going to focus on. So he met with Trump. Of course, like that wasn't ever going to happen with Trump, just because the party he's associated with, whether he wanted to or not, it's just not going to happen. And yeah, from a Republican perspective, right? In general, Republicans talk a lot about not spending more money on different programs, right? Except for on military, right? Like military spending is required from a Republican standpoint, but also Democrats worry about more government spending too. It's something that gets asked a lot, like how are we going to pay for that thing? And it's something that's asked by Republicans and Democrats in the United States. And so that's why it makes it so difficult to see something like this even pass. It's going to take some people in those positions to start to pressure on other things. Like I said, it's going to take either people of power or financial influence to tell people in power that they won't get help getting reelected, or it's going to take electing someone who happens to be for the idea of reparations to use this particular subject to maybe hold back votes on other things that someone in their party deems important, and they're like a critical vote, right? So right now, for instance, in terms of the Senate, right? It's 50 Democrats, 50 Republicans. The tiebreaker is the vice president, right? If anyone really wanted to push for a bill to be passed, someone on either side can say, I'm not signing reconciliation bill or any one of these other bills that everyone finds important until we do this, right? And then, or maybe two people, right? So then there is no tiebreaker. That right there would require this to go to a vote. But that's not something people want to focus their energy and attention on. They have their other pet projects that they're focused on, and those are the things that they call out. So, so Gary Smith says, other than Sierra Leone and Ghana, are there any other African countries you'd consider living? Okay, so we're getting off topic just a little bit, but okay, real quick though. Let me before I answer that question, let's stay on topic. So Staten Island 5 says, I'd like to see a lot of political and powerful people behind the legislation for reparations. I would too. I think it's tough, but I would like to see it as well. Okay, so really quickly, Gary's question. So back to your question, Gary. I've haven't been anywhere else. I'm going to Egypt in a few weeks. I'm going to Cairo, so it'll give me a chance to see what that's like. I still have yet to go to Nairobi, which is on my list, especially for what I want to do with investments. Nairobi is really a place that I want to go. And Lagos, I haven't been to Lagos yet, so it's on my list. I have a friend right now in Lekki. She says that I should come visit, but I haven't as of yet. And I have some colleagues and coworkers who live in Lagos, who all say that's where I should be. Even my boss is um, is a little confused why I didn't go to Lagos and why I came to Ghana. But yeah, so these are other places that I would consider. I just haven't been there yet to determine whether or not it makes sense for me to move there. All right, so get back on topic. So iTuber 12 says step one, we need to get our economics up worldwide. Do you see how business bend over for China? Step two, we elect a congressional black caucus that isn't useless. Okay. With the step one, yeah, I mean so here's one thing that I will say about China and the Chinese that is different from the continent of Africa. There are some things that translate really well, like manufacturing. A lot of the upper middle class in China have gotten that way because of manufacturing and factories and all of that kind of stuff throughout the 90s. And so many of them are taking those same ideas and bringing it to the continent of Africa. The thing is that in China, although you have biodiversity, right, you have religious diversity, and all kinds of other technical diversity. For the most part, the idea in China is this one China rule. It's one communist party. There's a very it's a communist government dictatorship in some people's minds, and I think most people's minds, right? So there's kind of a singular belief system around the country of China. It's such a massive size country and has so many people, but majority of the people there, from what I understand, move under on one accord, right? And the thing, and I honestly think that that's been their benefit over the last, I don't know, hundreds of years, right? Which is why like they were never conquered. The British got Hong Kong and it was even on lease and they gave it back after 100 years, right? Whereas in Africa, right, we are a continent of different tribes that technically work independently of each other, for better or for worse, right? And there've always been warring tribes here and there in each of our different respective areas and regions. And I do think that that contributed in large part to being divided up by different people, right? It's easier to conquer a group of people who aren't all speaking the same language, who aren't all under one accord, right? And so I think what we're seeing now is a shift to trying to pull groups of Africans together, right? You have ECOWAS in West Africa, which is the Economic Community of West African States. I think it's between 14 and 22 countries. I don't know what the exact number is, of countries that are working together economically and trying to do things to move together as a group. I think there's some North African countries doing it, East African countries are doing it, to Southern Africa and Central, I think, is doing it as well. So it is happening. But it's going to require a lot more of that over time to get us to a place where, as a continent, we have the same level of economic stability and power that a country like China has. You have different religions, you have small terrorist groups taking over small areas on the continent, terrorist affiliations and things like that. So you have areas on the continent in pockets, very small pockets, but it makes it difficult because they're on border regions and things like that to really make like different countries work together. And so, and then not to mention the civil war that happens in so many different countries here on the continent today. So there's a lot of work to be done to get to a place where we have enough economic power to force that. But once you get to the place where you have economic power, I wonder how much there will be people who want to actually do it, right? And then back to the Congressional Black Caucus. Yeah, I mean, this is interesting, right? Because I think people say that this is like the tokens, right? They're like token Black people. They're just there in like in character, but not there to actually do anything worth pushing things forward. So I mean, I think that this is a tough one. That's a tough one. But yeah, I mean, comparing Africa to China is a tough. especially because I've been studying China a lot more recently, and meeting a lot more Chinese people here, and it's just a different place, man. It's a completely different place, and there are some things that translate, but many things that don't. Um, Black Caucus is FOS. Dan Diablo says, I know what that means, but I won't repeat it. Um, OD99 says, yeah, the Congressional Black Caucus Caucasian only exists to serve their masters and keep the black population docile. Okay. Um, Okay, so it looks like there's a little bit of a debate going on in the YouTube comments about whether this is a hypothetical discussion or whatnot. Yeah, I mean, this is a hypothetical conversation as of right now. I mean, there was a bill legislation, there was a bill on the floor. There are some things being put out there. I mean, it's tough, like I said, because we're talking about something that was proposed over 130, 140 years ago. 100, sorry, like 100 and was what 1865. So I don't do math in public, but that's like 160. That's like 150 years ago, right? Almost 150 years ago. So how do you translate that into today's world? So yeah, so that's a tough one. So my man Jose Cruz says, has anyone said I accept them leaving Africa altogether as reports are on? I don't know what that means. Jose, can you explain? I don't know actually what that means. I was trying to read that and I wasn't really getting it. Can you put that in another way? I'd love to hear what you mean by that. So Mr. Bounce Los Angeles says, did everyone list what their idea for reparations should be? Only a couple people did. Yeah, let's do that. So again, I said land and cash payments. I'd love for everyone in the comments to list what your idea of reparations should be. Let's talk through some of those ideas. I'd love to hear that. So again, cash and land are my two things. I think if you get cash and land, that allows for people to be a little bit more self-sufficient, and they can do all the other things that people ask the government to do. There's a couple people joining on Instagram still. So, any thoughts? Duh, 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 duh. What's everybody's ideas for reparations? Don't all jump out at once. Again, my idea was cash and land. Yeah, so Dan Diablo, what are your ideas for reparations? Or iTuber, what are your ideas? I don't know if you guys have said them already. I know you guys are going back and forth in the comments, but I'd love if we could hear your ideas for reparations so we could talk about them a little bit. What would you guys like to see? Gary, Dan, OD99, iTuber, do you guys have any ideas? So Dan says, okay, so here we go. OD99 says, ideally land and money. We can create our own institutions. I agree. We're right in line with what I was thinking. Mr. Bounce Los Angeles, one of his boys, 88 Sports Talk, just joined. Shout out to 88 Sports Talk. Thanks for joining. Throw in your ideas for what you'd like to see in terms of reparations. I'd love to talk about it. So Dan says cash will go right back to the white man. Yeah, I mean, I've heard that actually. That statement's been told. I've heard that a ton of times, and that's actually probably true. When we talk about how long money stays in the Black community in the United States, it's something like 6 hours, right? So like most other nationalities in the U.S. keep money within their cultures for at least a day. Some people weeks. Some people it's up to like a month, if I'm not mistaken. But with Black Americans, it's 6 hours. However, um, my thought process is this: the more cash in hand, the more everyone gets more money, not just um, people of Caucasian descent with businesses, but people who have black businesses would too, right? Just everyone would benefit as a business owner from everybody having more cash. But yes, it is true that people of color, specifically black people in the United States, spend more than they make, and that money does tend to leave the black community more often. So maybe part of it would be, but see, this is where it goes in a slippery, down a slippery slope. Where if you're giving reparations and then saying how somebody should spend it, that's a tough one. So Dan, what are your thoughts? What would you like to see if you feel like cash will go back right back to the white man? What would you like to see in terms of reparations? Is it land? Is it some other form of reparations? What are your thoughts? Jose Cruz says all foreign countries leave all companies' assets, take their people back to the country of origin. White South Africans, Chinese, Arabs. Right. Okay, I see what you mean. So yeah, I mean that happens a lot, right? So people leave their countries, go to Africa, or come to the continent of Africa, start to use up some of the natural resources, do businesses back home, and their countries back home benefit. Um, I think the Africans on the continent have been doing that for a while, and they're starting to repatriate back to the continent. So it's good to see. Obviously, people in my generation, people in the generation before me, have been doing it. So I'd like to see more of it for sure. But yeah, I mean that's just the nature of how things are with Africa being such a fertile place. People are always going to be going to take advantage and not not helping to further the continent, which is why more people like us need to be back here to help change that narrative and fix that. iTuber says, we have folks who just look around and say this place sucks about Africa, and then someone will come along with an idea to improve it, and no matter the idea, they will go, nah, that won't work. Yeah, that happens from time to time for sure. But I will say people are more receptive to diasporans coming back than probably ever before. I think there's a strong belief system from at least the people that I talk to that together we can get to a place where we take our rightful place back on the world stage. I mean, as you guys know, especially many of you who follow me on Instagram, I know that you guys are all aware of this. But there was a time where the continent of Africa was sought after for mathematics and teaching people how to bathe in Europe, and during a time in Europe which we learned about in school called the Dark Ages, it was actually a flourishing time for the continent of Africa, right? And many times before that, there have been many um, dynasties on the continent that have maybe not ruled globally, but had really great self-sustaining kingdoms. And of course, as we all know, the richest man in human history is Mansa Musa, who ruled the Mali Empire, which basically makes up a lot of Central and West Africa. So yeah, I mean, I definitely think that we as a group need to work together to help to uh, improve the continent, and part of that could happen through reparations. All right, so Mari Shai says cash and land. All right, cool. And she also says, hello, everyone. What's up? What's up? Dan Diablo says we have our own universities, HBU. They're constantly being integrated with non-blacks. Yeah, I mean, look, HBCUs don't have that many non-blacks there, right? I think, but it does happen, right? It does happen. They do allow other non-blacks in those HBCUs. But I haven't heard your ideas yet, Dan, on reparations. Do you have any thoughts? I'd love to hear them. Is it Sade? Sade? Cash and the colonists must leave black communities to run their own governments. Reparations to black countries also. That's interesting, to run their own governments. So would you mean like this? So this cash? Well, yeah, I'd love to hear what you mean by to run their own governments. Do you mean black countries to run their own governments? Uh, I got you. So like, no, not ruling by proxy, which happens a lot here, right? Yeah, I got you. Nice. I like it. Um, so Gary Smith says land money. Land depends on where. Yeah, true. Land depends on where. It definitely depends on where, because some land, not all land is good land. I think Jose's meant every single person of African descent go back to Africa as repatriation. Okay. So iTuber with step one again. The West pays cash to the people enslaved Africans. Step two, African restores the people's dignity and lineage by granting citizenship and passports, especially Liberia and Sierra Leone, to anyone who returns. Yeah, I love that idea. I will say Sierra Leone is offering citizenship to those who can trace their lineage back to Sierra Leone's. So that is something that is really interesting. Really quickly, since I talked about it, I'm going to mention it really quickly. So Staten Island 5 says, I always wanted to know what happened to Mansa Musa's wealth as far as inheritance. So a couple things. He was very generous. So on his, and I this is like, I don't have all the deep knowledge of Mansa Musa, but here's what I understand. He did his holy trip to Mecca. On that trip, he spent tons and tons of cash, giving money to different groups of people along the way, to help the people along the way. He also brought a ton of people with him. And then, of course, when you're gone for that long, because it was all done by, I guess, by foot. I don't know how many years this was, over how many years this happened, but basically his kingdom fell apart without him being there to rule it. And so I don't know where the money went, but there's some people that speculate that um, it went to personally uh, enrich certain people within the country once he was gone, or within the empire, I should say. And then also a lot of it went to the neighboring tribes and groups of people that he visited on his way to Mecca, and I guess on the way back too. Um, but I would definitely say look that up, because there's definitely plenty of people who've talked about it, who've dug into this. Okay, so back to this. Sade says the oppressors should be forced to tell the truth about their countries. Also, our people in Africa, the Caribbean, need to learn the truth about West and stop worshiping the West. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there should be some kind of acknowledgement. The tough part is, once you acknowledge it, maybe that's the first step to something, but they've acknowledged it. They've acknowledged it, but it's kind of just kind of like half-assed or half-heartedly acknowledging it and then kind of move on. So OD99 says that's why we need institutions to teach financial literacy, so we don't just squander away gains from reparations. In the current paradigm, we are only taught to be consumers, not producers or end investors. That is true. That is very true. But I think with reparations, we can then make and build the universities and make sure that the curriculums are taught in a certain way in order to do that. But yeah, I agree that needs to be taught. And Jose Cruz says, do the U.S. government turn over black belt to black people, sovereign land, the same people they did to the reservations? Yeah, so here's the thing. With the reservations for Native Americans, they gave some land, right? But Native Americans were all over the United States, right? And the reservations are few and far between in the United States and in North America, I think, overall. So yeah, maybe the U.S. government turns over certain parts of land, but at this point, it's kind of hard to do. The U.S. does have eminent domain, but everybody owns some land somewhere, and so the government to come take that land from them is going to be very hard to do. Okay, so Dan Diablo gave their thoughts. A little controversial in the beginning here. Get rid of churches and mosques, etc. Persons of African descent granted citizenship to the country of their choice. African countries be self-government with presidential term limits. Yeah, so everything after the ellipsis, I think is what it's called, I can rock with. I like that. I can't say that I would agree with the getting rid of churches and mosques just because of it's people's belief systems, right? I think that's a tough one. But I do love the idea of granting everyone citizenship of the country of their choice. I think what has to happen, though, is those countries have to do it, right? So that wouldn't be reparations, right? That's not reparations, because that country has to agree to your citizenship, not the United States. The United States won't be the one who can choose that. Mari Shai says, I'm getting citizenship in Sierra Leone in November. Can't wait. Shout out to you. I got citizenship in Sierra Leone in 2019. It's actually really cool to have dual citizenship. I mean, Sierra Leone is not a place that like you can get into a lot of places that you can't as an American citizen. But having dual citizenship makes it easier to travel around all the ECOWAS countries without having to get a visa, and you pay less for the COVID test when you have to go between countries, right? Because in general, if you're an American citizen or a citizen from anywhere else, and if you're going from one country to another, or even coming to West Africa, in general, it's almost double the price in a lot of cases, right? So, but I'm an ECOWAS passport holder. So when I travel to Sierra Leone or back to Ghana, or when I'm going to go to Nigeria and the other places I plan to go in West Africa, I don't have to pay what everybody else has to pay for the COVID test. And I don't have to pay for a visa, which is great. So shout out to you for Mari for getting your dual citizenship. Jose said I'm talk texting and it's coming out weird. Got it. I guess you're driving, Jose. I'm assuming you're driving out there. You're in Phoenix, right? I think you're in Phoenix. Talk texting, yeah. I don't talk text because it always gets what I'm saying wrong. So iTuber says congratulations to Mari. Shout out to you. All right, Mr. Bounce Los Angeles says the U.S. should be hosting and financing annual birthright trips to the continent as they do with the Jewish and Israel. So there is a company called Birthright Africa, by the way. Jadena is on the board. You should follow those guys on Instagram, and they're really trying to work on something like that. I don't know how much the U.S. is involved in the Jewish birthright, but I do know people who've done it. Throughout my career, I've worked with people whose family is Jewish, and they were Jewish, and they would go to Israel, and there's a whole process, and it's a thing. Like pretty much, almost everyone whose parents are serious or they're serious about being Jewish, they do this. And so I definitely think there needs to be more people from the African diaspora doing this. And there is a company called Birthright Africa working on this. Again, Jadena, the musician, the artist from the United States who's of Nigerian lineage, he is on the board. I think he's hosting something here in Ghana at the end of this year, if I'm not mistaken. So definitely look into that, guys, because there is something that's already happening, but we should definitely do it. Dan Diablo says African countries getting the majority of profit, 70% and up of their natural resources deal with the West. I love that idea. That takes some negotiation, definitely, by the Africans in all of their deals. They need to do some better negotiation or step away, walk away from the deal. I've seen that there have been, like the president of Ghana actually has decided to if I can't remember what export it is, I can't even remember what country it is, but decided to stop exporting a certain export to a specific country for those reasons entirely. So I agree. I think we working those deals makes sense. Mari's just thanking. The reverse Berlin conference, Yuku. Is it Yuku? Yeah, reverse Berlin conference. So the Berlin conference, and again, I'm not the greatest of historians, but the way I understand it is basically after World War One, Europe just basically divided. Was it World War One or World War Two? Correct me if I'm wrong. You guys know, I'm sure. Divided the world into their own personal ownership, right? In a bunch of different places. It had already been done on the continent, but in other places as well. So doing and then even dividing up. Oh, actually, you know what? Let me take a step back. I think it was World War II, because that was where the British and the French took over formerly German colonies on the continent of Africa. And then in the Middle East, it happened with, Iran and Iraq and a few other places where the West basically took ownership of other people's countries. And so, yeah, the reverse Berlin Conference would allow us to then take back our land, which would be really cool. I think that that's a good idea. I don't know how that would happen, but I like that a lot. All right, iTuber says, yeah, I love Mansa Musa and we love Mansa Musa in the West, but I hear he is not a popular figure in Mali. Yeah, I don't know, and I'd have to talk to people from Mali about how they feel about Mansa Musa. I don't know what he did as a ruler, really. I mean, I think it's just the one thing that's always brought up about him was that he was the richest person in human history, and it's going to be a while before he is surpassed. Well, not a while actually, because it looks like Jeff Bezos is what at 200 billion, and Mansa Musa was worth over 420 billion by today's standards. Jose Cruz says black people should be given the South. Oh, that's a tough one. The whole South. What states are you talking about? Where? How would that happen? That's a tough one. That's a tough one. But I hear you. Yuku says an unorganized body will never outmaneuver an organized body. That is true, and I guess that goes back to my conversation or my comments about, um, our different countries on the continent working disparately and in silos, right? So let's see if we can get to a place where we are working as an organized body. iTuber says he has a Sierra Leone passport. Shout out to you. So Sade Jones says you guys also need to know that indigenous people are Black Americans and Native Americans came later. You can find Black indigenous people in Long Island, New York. They are, and I don't want to mispronounce the people. Yeah, I mean, this is a conversation that's been happening a lot because there were Africans that explored the West, right? And there are Europeans who, when they reached the Americas, they mentioned that they saw Africans in the Americas. There's always a question as to how many were here, right? And right, because then there's also that question of how many were brought over on slave ships or brought over on ships that they went out on sea on themselves with, right? And then if you're African, but if you're of African descent and you're here, and you might have come under your own accord 250 years ago, then the question is, do you qualify for reparations? So, but yeah, I think that there's a lot of talk and a lot of chatter about the fact that there were Africans here. Some people say Native Americans came later. Some people say that Africans came after some Native Americans were here. There's still a lot of dispute in a lot of the historical communities on this. One thing we know for sure is that there were some, at least some Africans by European accounts here on the continent or there on the continent of North America um, before the transatlantic slave trade. The question is how many? So Sade says the Africans are the first to come to Americas. Mansa Musa sent many people here way before Columbus. Yeah, so that's the other thing is that they say that Mansa Musa was the one. Well, not I don't know if it was Mansa Musa or is his father. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was his father and people the generation before him that sailed west. And then apparently some people came back and told stories of the West. I don't have all the details. I read a little bit about it, but from what I understand, at his time when Mansa Musa was ruling, and a little bit before, there is talks that people from his empire or his kingdom actually did sail west and made it to the Americas. Okay, Mari Shai and iTuber are talking about where they're from. And Dan Diablo says it was cocoa. Yes, it was cocoa. And I'm wondering what country it was with. I think it was France, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, it was. So when we're talking about deciding not to export anymore, Yuku says everyone should study the Sankara and the revolution in Burkina Faso before they try and do any negotiating. Okay. So I stand corrected. The Berlin Conference was World War One, or 1885 before World War One. Yeah. So I guess they're saying the Berlin Conference was 1885. So okay. So pre World War One, the world was divided up into different places, and Berlin Conference is where that happened. Okay. So iTuber saying Elon Musk is actually close. He is at 300 billion as of today, as Tesla market cap just hit 1 trillion. I get okay. So this is what happened. The news of people saying that he will be the first trillionaire it's like a self-perpetuating cycle, has actually risen the stock for Tesla, which is interesting. It just hit 1 trillion, and the SpaceX is going to go public which yes, some people are saying will make Elon Musk a trillionaire. And will either way, when SpaceX goes public, that'll be at least another 100 billion. So at that point, he will likely surpass Mansa Musa as the richest person in human history. Jose's coming back to the original question of giving Black people of the South. His answer is Florida to the Virginia coastline. Wow. That is quite a lot of land. That's a tough one. I don't know. I mean, I think at that point you'd have to kick out a lot of other people, right? And so I don't know how you do that at this point. Um, OD99 says we get North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And then Yuku says that's not our natural habitat. Now I'm getting a phone call. That's my Uber driver who picks me up in the morning. I wonder why he's calling me at 10:10 at night. Interesting. Um, okay, so iTuber says this is the they came before Columbus crowd, which relates to Mansa Musa, the ruler before he made many boats to set sail west and never returned. Okay. Yes. Okay. Okay. So I don't know what I heard of whether they returned or never returned, but some people speculate they didn't return because they drowned at sea. Other people say that they some did return and they told stories about the West and they actually made it to the West. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's but either way, we do know that Europeans who came to the Americas did mention that there were people that look like of African descent. Yeah, so Abu Bakari the second, not Mansa Musa. So it was before Mansa Musa, though, right? I think is what I think the history says. Sade Jones says here are some books. The First Americans Were Africans by D. David Imhotep, and They Came Before Christopher Columbus by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. They can all be found on YouTube. Okay, cool. Yuku said brown skinned, fluffy haired people are native to the tropics, abundant vegetation, optical climate, celebratory culture, glimmering brown skin, sustainability, fortify the homeland. Yeah. Okay. So let's see what else we got on. Okay. Okay. So back to what we want for reparations. So Mr. Bounce Los Angeles says tax breaks, free education, and farmland land. Tax breaks. I like it. Who doesn't want tax breaks? Free education, I like it, and farmland. Yeah, I mean, it would have to be public education, right? Because that's the only thing the government can mandate is the public education, public schools. I mean, public schools are technically already free. There was some talk about making community colleges that are state owned free, but I don't think that ever came to fruition. Colleges make way too much money for them to want to make them free. That's the tough part. So you got to find that money elsewhere, and that's the problem they're having is they don't want to find the money elsewhere. Okay. Okay. Society Jones says most Black indigenous people were enslaved and their ethnicity was changed to African American. So the African Americans were our indigenous deserve reparations. Okay, I see what you're saying. So I think you're saying the Africans that were here prior to the slave trade also deserve reparations. iTuber says the story is he returned and said a storm swallowed most of their boats, most of the other boats, and so the king made new, stronger boats and set sail for the second time and never returned. Before he left, he put Musa as king. Okay, so yeah, that's what it was. So it was Mansa Musa's predecessor who sailed and never returned, but Mansa Musa took over and ruled the Mali Empire. Now I remember. Yes, that is all coming back to me from what I read. Yeah. Okay. Mr. Bounce Los Angeles says, should we be given a certain area of land? For example, California, Oregon, Washington State. Ooh. The thing is that at this point, right, like the best time to be given, so if there's government owned land, that land should be given to, I think, to people who are getting reparations, right? Because I think the issue with just giving any other land is that it's owned by someone privately currently. And so to take that land and to give it away is a really, really tough thing to do. And you're not going to get cooperation from people on that. So I know that the government owns certain land in different places. I think that land should be given up. I don't know if it should be military bases or what. But certain land should be given that's American owned, owned by the American government. I think if you're going to give land, it should be that land. That way, you don't have to have disputes with people who already own the land that people who are looking for reparations want. Um, so for reparation, they should also give us two. OD99. What are you talking about? Two wives. Jose Cruz says land is number one thing owed to black people because the amount of money cash can't be calculated. Okay. So the 40 acres, I mean, it was 40 acres, and then eventually it was don't loan mules, give mules to people, because mules help you with that land, right? Help you cultivate that land. So yeah. So iTuber says most Western states have large empty land owned by the federal government, especially Nevada and Montana. Okay, so then those areas of land should probably be the land that's given. I mean, it's not as the most desirable because it's not maybe necessarily the most fertile ground, but it's probably the only land that can be given if it's owned by the government. I didn't know that the government owns a lot of that land. So if they do, then they should be giving. That should be the land that should be given to, in my opinion, for reparations. Okay. Yuko said, we should make all black professionals and businesses pay a self reparations tax to our various underserved and underfunded physical and virtual Pan African schools and redevelopment firms. Um, yeah, that's another one, right? Well, you're forcing people what to do with their own money. That's a challenge, right? I mean, my thought process is maybe you can have a provision in the bill where you're offering reparations, but a portion of the funds need to go into black businesses, right? Maybe there's a way to do that. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. But I hear you. iTuber says, I think upwards of 40% of Nevada land is owned by the federal government. Oh, right, because Area 51 is there, right? So there's that. I think Area 51 is in Nevada, right? So I think that there's a whole bunch of land there that, like test sites for like bombing and stuff like that. And it's a desert. Nevada's a desert, giant desert. So yeah, that's a tough one. But again, we're talking about land when Liberia already exists and has a low population. Yeah, Liberia exists and does have a low population. Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about Liberia, too much about Liberia. I know a couple of Liberians I met while being here on the continent, especially being in Sierra Leone when I was there. Um, and Liberia has a way to go before I think anybody who doesn't already have wealth and a good amount of money stashed away could go and live comfortably, right? I think in terms of having a career there, it might be challenging for those from the diaspora, uh, as well as Sierra Leone too, right? I mean, which is why I'm living in Ghana. But I hear you though. There's already land and not a huge population, um, that you could potentially go. It's tough with what people are used to and living coming from a first world. So we're talking about black people because white people only recognize military, right? Military might. They will never negotiate reparations if we have no ability to take it. iTuber says I agree. Yeah, I mean, yeah, but I mean, yeah. So but I don't know if we want to take people's land at like I think we're still talking about taking people's land, right? Um, because I don't know if we want to just take people's land. That's a tough one, right? Black or white people's land. I mean, I mean, that's a tough one. It's a tough one. You know, that's one of those things where it's like, how do you justify doing today for something that happened in the past, right? Because you can look at the what happened with Israel, right? And Palestine, right? The claim was that, well, you know, this was taken from us a couple thousand years ago, so we can come back and take it from you guys now, and we can occupy a portion of it, and you know, we can use militarized rule and take more and more of your land. And I just see that as a really, really tough argument to make, of taking other people's land, if that's what we're advocating for. Mr. Bounce Los Angeles says, or shall I say areas, plural, separate areas of land that are spread out. Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of taking different areas or getting different areas of land across across North America, specifically across the U.S. For sure. Um, okay, what do we got? U.S. should pay for all black people descent or descendants of enslaved to visit Africa once in their life. I like that idea. I like that idea. I mean, it is can be a bit expensive, but then again, I see people going all kinds of other places for vacations, and they don't come to West Africa. So definitely come to West Africa for sure. Um, we have to build ourselves up, and then we can lobby for these things, which is backwards, but that's how the world works, right? Yeah, I mean, you once you get economically stable, then you're lobbying for reparations. There's going to be less sympathy for the idea of it, but if you have more power, you can probably get it, right? So, or you have more people positioned in power, you can probably get it. Okay, um, we are at 1 hour and 22 minutes. This has been a long and interesting discussion. I think a lot of people got a chance to get their thoughts out. I'd like to hear what other people are thinking. You know, there's a list of other ideas for conversations that you guys had asked me to do. So I want to know in your mind if you still want to do these topics, because it took a while, but people finally got into this one. But if I'm looking at the numbers, this is definitely a underperforming topic, right? It doesn't seem as many people are interested in the idea of talking about reparations. Um, I would say on Instagram Live, it's been a steady number of people who wanted to check this out, but like on YouTube, I think more people are interested in topics specific to Africa, and specific to Ghana even. So I'm gonna go through some of these other topics that were given to me before, and I want to hear your thoughts on these and if you think we should cover them, because next Monday I'm going to either have a guest or not, but I'm going to talk about one of these topics. So, the first one was criminal justice in Ghana. Can I get a show of hands? People that give me a thumbs up if you want to hear me talk about criminal justice in Ghana. I have a lawyer that I work with who could potentially join me on that discussion. It wouldn't be next week, but it's a topic that can be discussed. Do you guys want to hear that? Thumbs up if you do, thumbs down if you don't. I want to know either way. In the meantime, iTuber says next topic, Ghana and returnees. What is next in terms of culture, class, integration, class differences? Okay, that's a good topic. I'll write that down. Ghana and returnees. Okay, Odie99 says they do want to hear about criminal justice in Ghana. Okay, especially after last week's discussion. There are some questions on some of these things. Okay, but it doesn't seem like too many people want to hear that. So I got one for criminal justice in Ghana. Not too many people said they wanted to. Of course, this is also a lighter live, so we don't have as many people on as we normally do. Okay, Sade says that she wants to hear it too, so we got two for that. Okay. All right. So I'm going to move on to the next one because only two people have commented on criminal justice in Ghana. There's another conversation on Afro international relationships. Can people in those relationships be pro-black? So meaning if you're in a biracial relationship, it looks like Eric B is Eric B. Are you saying you want to hear about criminal justice in Ghana or Afro international relationships? Can they be pro-black? And I want you guys to let me know. Do you guys want to hear Afro international topics and being pro-black? Do you guys want to hear that? Let me know. Can you be pro-black if you are in a biracial relationship? It's a conversation about THC here, about cannabis being too dangerous now that THC level is so high. It's not that high in everything. No, you can find cannabis without such high levels of THC. If you're at least if you're somewhere where it's legal, right? Where you can actually see the THC levels. But I know what you mean. Okay, so it looks like not too many. So some people say they want to hear. Okay, so thumbs up. YMCMB 1955. Smoky Stacks, and looks like you guys want to hear about the pro Afro international, or sorry, the Afro international relationships. Can you be pro black? Eric B says both. iTuber says, do Western black men do better than Western African women while dating in Africa? Okay, that's a good topic. Okay, so we'll make that another topic. Okay, so there's a few here. Mari Shai, are you saying thumbs down to criminal justice in Ghana or thumbs down to the interracial relationships? Can they be pro-black? Okay. So it looks like there was more people who wanted to hear about the Afro interracial relationships. Can they be pro-black? So that's definitely one. And then there's also a conversation to be had about Africa and the diaspora and unity between the two groups. You know, that's something that's come up a ton. And so I do want to talk about that. I likely will have a West African on it, someone who's born of the continent and lives on the continent. I want to make sure that I have them on. Are you guys interested in hearing about that? The world, the divide and unity between Africans in the diaspora and Africans on the continent. So, like African Americans, for instance, or British Africans who were born and raised in the diaspora and who have roots at least 2 generations back in the diaspora. Okay, so it looks like some people want to hear about that too. Okay, so these are good topics. All right, so those are the topics that we'll cover in the next couple weeks. Can you be a pro-black being in an interracial relationship? I know 2 people in interracial relationships. I don't know if they'd want to come on to do this conversation, especially because sometimes you guys can be a little hostile to some of these topics. So I don't know how receptive they might be, or you might be to them. So I'd have to think about that. But yeah, I think that that's a good conversation to have for sure. Unity is another conversation to be had. It looks like a bunch of people were interested in that too. And then criminal justice in Ghana was another one. And then a couple other ones were, do black men do better in West Africa versus women? And then there was another one on Ghana and returnees. What's next in terms of culture clash? Okay, what's that like? Okay, cool. All right, guys. It is now 10:30, and my day is nowhere near being done. I have to get back to work on my day job. Unfortunately, we are a week away from starting our Black Friday festivities, and I have clients like Coca-Cola and Unilever and all these other clients that are trying to figure out how they can become a part of it, and I have a lot of work to do to get them ready. So with that, I want to thank you guys all for joining. If you like this content, go ahead, like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends. next time I will make sure I have more energy for you guys. I was up early this morning and up late last night working, so I'm really tired today. But I want to thank you guys all for joining and sticking with it to the end. I'm going to have some interesting topics for you guys next Monday. But in the meantime, Wednesday, check out my weekly update. And on Saturday, check out my update. I'm going to show you guys what a luxury hotel looks like in Sierra Leone. I already did one I did one yesterday. So check that out. And then this coming Saturday, I got another one coming up. All right. And Jose, shout out to you. Thanks for coming through. Sade says we need to focus on building bridges across ethnic groups between the diaspora and people on the continent. So that's definitely a good content, some good content for another call or for another live. And Mari Shai says, have a nice day. All right, guys. Thanks, guys, for joining. Make sure you everybody, make sure you hit the like button on this video after this video gets posted so that it gets more love, because I need you guys to help me out with that. And with that, I'll see you guys all in the next video.